Welcome to Chuck Build's 5th video on your first boot into HomeAssistant. So you've installed HomeAssistant and you connect to the web page, and you will have to create an account, set your home location, your language, your currency, and your measurement metric or imperial, and you'll be greeted by your dashboard. Before we get too far along here, I want to preface that this video is for total newcomers and just kind of showing you where things are and certain terminology to become familiar with in HomeAssistant. We won't be setting up any devices or creating any automations in this video. This is just kind of show you where things are and what they do. All right, diving into it on our overview page of HomeAssistant. I'm going to be just running through a quick few buttons and showing you what a few things do. This won't be all inclusive. I highly recommend that you play around with this and add a few devices to just get those gears turning. But on your overview page, if you come up to the top corner and hit Edit Dashboard, you'll get the option to add a card down here in the bottom right. These cards are how you will interact with your HomeAssistant dashboard and receive information. You can add tons of these. A lot of these will pop up based on your device. You can do it by entity here as well, and it'll make some recommendations. For example, if I just continue for a backyard speaker, it'll show us, we can turn it on or off and what's playing, or send text to speech over it. There's a few different cards that would give you different views. So this one's a little bit less informative or fun. It just says the name of the device and its current status here, and the volume level when it's on. So that's kind of how you'll play around with your main view, your home page. But you can go up here and add a view with this plus button, and you can make it whatever you want. I often have a control page for switches that I don't use that often and don't have automated, such as my grill that's on a smart switch, but I don't need to see that every day. So when you switch between the two, you'll get a different layout, and that's going to be your main interaction with HomeAssistant. You have an energy tab that you can track consumption with smart plugs or a breaker box meter, or even some power companies give you the ability to see your power usage. You can see return to grid if you have solar, and you can add a CO2 integration to see when you're using your power, the most power if you're using renewable sources or not. The map view will kind of show you your home and where your different users are located if you have multiple users. The logbook is where you will see the statuses and information for your devices and entities as they change. We can see here when I turned on and off that speaker. You can adjust your date range to see if there was something acting weird last week and you're not really sure what it was. History is based on a specific entity or device. So I think I was using bathroom speaker, and we can see when it was off or on. Haven't been using it today in this time frame. Media is sending a text to speech or playing a certain sound file over the speakers around your house or in your browser. I don't really use the media that much, to be honest. Developer tools are a great way to restart and check your configurations. YAML is a formatting type of configuration file that we will be using a lot of in HomeAssistant. So just kind of get used to seeing that and knowing where you can refresh this when you make changes, and check and see if everything's working as expected. We have more specific information for states, services, and templates. I really don't find myself using this much more than checking the configuration and restarting it from here. Moving into settings, we'll have our updates across the top. As you have different add-ons installed, you'll often see those needing updates here as well. The HomeAssistant core does update quite often. Try to be good about keeping up to date. I've never had anything break from an update, but it's something to practice to be in good habits with. When you click on this, you can see the version that you have last installed and what's the latest version, and then be sure to check the read announcement where they'll explain everything new in the latest release. And make sure you always have that checkbox, create a backup before updating. Moving along with our settings options, we have the HomeAssistant Cloud. This is run by Nabu Casa, which is founded by the founders of HomeAssistant, and is a paid service to access your HomeAssistant anywhere without a VPN and to offer very easy setup of control of your Amazon or Google devices. I personally pay for this as a way to give back to the Home Assistant founders because it is a great free tool, and this is a way for them to continue development and make their money. Everything that Nabu Casa does, you can do yourself for free. It just takes a little bit more work, and I don't mind paying them. Devices and services is really what I wanted to talk about in this video. You have something called an integration, you have something called a device, and you have something called an entity. Integrations, think about this like the app on your phone that you would log into to manage that one manufacturer's group of devices. You can probably see my August smart lock. You can see my connected security system. You can see my Ecobee thermostats, my Flume water monitor. All of these are separate apps on my phone that I will need to set up inside of Home Assistant to control these devices through their server-side software. Some of these devices you can control locally, and some of them you can't. I prefer to control everything I can locally. We can see some of those here as these Yale locks via Bluetooth. These Yale locks are the same as August. If I had a Z-Wave controller, we'd see some of them there as well. Ecobee you can set up to work locally as well, but if you want to use the app and get the same features as the app, you'd have to set it up through their API, and you'd go get the key from their website. Each integration would be slightly different to set up. August, I believe, requires your account. Ecobee requires an API key that you can get from your account that uniquely identifies you. I think the Apple TV, there's a code that pops up on the screen. There's just a little bit of a difference for setup for all the different manufacturers. Take some time, set up your devices that are already on your network, and start thinking of little automations that you can tag together. An integration can have many devices. I can have many Ecobees with this one Ecobee integration, and each of those Ecobee devices can have many entities. I don't actually have my Ecobee set up right now, so I will use Google Cast. These are my Google speakers and Chromecasts around the house. There are 10 devices and 10 entities. Sometimes there will be more, but the devices are the physical thing that I have, or in this case, I have a Google Cast group, which is a software-defined device that is all of my Google speakers, that they'll all work together, and I set that in Google Home. But the Google device, or the speaker, only has a few entities, and we can come back and see that here, and it's pretty much what's playing on this media player. We saw on the overview the speaker is here. This is based on the entity for the bedroom speaker, and we could see when it was last changed, its current state, what was playing, and then the volume level. I mainly want to call out devices have a lot of entities, and you're going to end up with a lot of entities if you have a lot of devices, and that you just need to think about what specific feature of that device you're trying to use. When it comes to my motion sensors that I have in my office to turn on my lights and monitors when I walk in and then automatically turn them off if I'm not in the room, I can't just say motion sensor in the office, turn things on and off. I need to say the occupancy of this sensor is what determines that, because this also gives out things like battery level or the light, the brightness in the room. And you can use all of these exposed entities from a device to create automations. And sometimes you'll create buttons or switches to control entities as well. Kind of hard to say as like a concept. It really depends device to device and what they are showing you. But I wanted to kind of call that out if you've never heard the term entity and you're wondering, why do I need to keep track of all of these? I don't have this many devices. What is all this? That's kind of what you're going to be using for a lot of these automations. Helpers are exactly what they're called. They're here to help. I often find myself using the group function, especially for lights in a room. I don't want to say, turn off the lights in my office and turn off light 1, turn off light 2, light 3, and light 4. And for each of those, loop through the same command of turning it on and off. I'll group them and say my office lights, turn off the office lights. That way I have one button and I can change all their brightness and settings from one place. Moving on to automations and scenes, I will say I mostly use Node-RED for my automations, but the automations that I do use through the Home Assistant automations area are blueprints that I've gotten from the community. And discovering or importing blueprints is a major key for a quick and smart home setup. You can likely do a lot of it yourself, and I highly encourage you to challenge yourself to walk through the mental exercise of what is needed to get the outcome that you want. But sometimes you'll find that the community, where hundreds of people have collaborated to make the best version of the same function you want to execute, is really easy just to click download, set it up, and let it go. For me, that's my notifications based on my security cameras. I've created it several times in Node-RED and it works, but the blueprint for it is great, and the buttons are just so much more responsive than what I got to work for myself. Moving on to areas and zones. Areas are what you'll use when you use Amazon Alexa or your Google Home and you want to say, turn off my office lights or turn off my bedroom lights. This is how you let it know what devices are in what rooms. And zones are actions that you can configure based on the geographic zone that you can draw. So for me, I use this when I leave a zone around my home to turn off my lights, lock my doors, and arm my security system. And you can create these zones on the map with longitude, latitude, and increase the radius and see how that takes up more and more space. Going down to add-ons, these are tools that you can download from Home Assistant in the add-on store and run inside of Home Assistant. I previously mentioned this in a different video about how this is very much like Docker, but you can also use the add-on store to run them inside of Home Assistant. And I think that's super powerful and one of the best reasons that Home Assistant operating system is so easy to recommend, because you gain so much functionality and so many services in one box without cutting yourself off from the opportunity to host these additional services. Dashboards we've already kind of covered with our overview and energy dashboard. You can create new ones. And then you have Home Assistant voice assistants, where you can add your assistant, choose your language, and see what entities are exposed to that assistant. I would strongly recommend that you limit what you're exposing. So if you say something like turn off the lights, that it doesn't speak back to you that it failed to turn off 100 lights when it's referring to the infrared light or spotlight on your security cameras, or lights on a device such as a status light. Getting towards the end here, we have tags for QR codes and NFC that you can put around the house to execute a automation or action or change something when you scan it. I don't really use those. I see the function available if you have guests often. I just don't think I'd be pulling out my camera to scan QR codes that often. But speaking of guests, you have a people option to manage who has access to your home. You can add family members or guests and allow them to log in to get presence detection based on the app on their phone and to see the dashboards that you've made available to them for them to control things in your home as well. The system tab is very important. The updates we've kind of already seen. You can see it again through here. The repairs, or if something is broken. Logs are very important if something is not working correctly. We've got a couple of errors here, and you should take the time to check these logs and see what is not working as intended. Backups are very, very important, and you can come down to the bottom right-hand corner to create a backup. This is a great way to save your Home Assistant everything from the setup of your entities and integrations to your automations to the layout, and that backup can be restored to any device, not just the one that you're currently on. You'll use that backup if you move from a Raspberry Pi to a PC or a PC to a Docker container. That backup is what you want to transfer and restore from. I recommend doing automatic backups and then also scheduling a backup if you're about to really start playing around with the overall look and feel of your Home Assistant. Analytics we clicked through when we were setting up Home Assistant, and I recommend just checking them all. I'm okay with Home Assistant seeing what I'm using and diagnostics when it crashes, because I think they actually use that to fix things. Sometimes companies, I feel like it's a waste of time. I support Home Assistant. I think they do a good job with that. Network, you can control your external access, your URL if you have a domain. I just do this through a VPN or Nabu Casa. Storage, you can move data to another disk if you want to add an SSD or flash drive to export your camera recordings, or network storage if you're really recording a lot. Hardware is a great tab to know. It'll outline everything connected and you can see stats and usages, but this power button up here in the corner will get a lot of use as you make changes to your Home Assistant with add-ons and configuration changes. You'll do quick reloads and restarts all the time to make sure that those are loaded and working. That's really it for the buttons and settings in Home Assistant. This ended up being a little longer than I would have liked, but I didn't want to leave you hanging. Felt a little silly at times, clicking buttons and then telling you what the button says, but I know how overwhelmed I was the first time I logged into my instance and had nothing set up and just didn't even know where to begin. So to help push you along, what are your next steps? I would highly recommend that you go to your devices and services and set up as many integrations are already on your network. This is going to help you set up your smart home with devices that you already have before you start worrying about Zigbee and buying things and downloading custom components. Set up what you already have. Get a little dashboard put together where you can turn things on and off easily. Get the app on your phone, and hopefully that'll help your home start feeling a little bit smarter right away for free before we get a little customized with new automations and start thinking about what problems you need to solve.